Hey everyone, welcome to Sociastrology. Today we're going to take a look at the new moon in Scorpio, which is set to take place on the 19th to 20th of November 2025, depending on where you are. For instance, in the US, this is going to be right in the middle of approximately midnight. It'll be straddling midnight across the US time zones. Now, I don't always do videos about lunations, but when they stand out like this one, I definitely need to go into it. So there are several reasons why this new moon is going to be quite loud, very distinctive. So we'll start with the kind of astronomical context here. This new moon is very weird because it is coinciding with the farthest away from Earth that the moon is going to be until 2043, which just so happens to be when Pluto will be finally moving into Pisces as well. So we can see that notation here. This little moon head person is what it looks like. That's the black moon Lilith. That's the lunar apogee. And this new moon is going to be taking place right next to it. So it's a few hours. I think it's about 4 hours after that moon hits that farthest point that it's going to be from Earth. And this is an extraordinary one where it's not been since 2020 that it's been remotely this close. And before that, not since 2002. And locationally, it's going to be over the North Atlantic that this moon is the farthest, because the moon will basically be over Australia. So that may have some relevance here, the North Atlantic, I'm not quite sure. But again, the previous moons that were the farthest from Earth, we had one in March of 2020, which of course was a pretty distinctive period of time. And the time before that was in March of 2002, which we also know was a pretty extraordinary period of time. I would assume that this is also speaking to similar issues of extremes and revelation of what is hidden as well. So, of course, in 2002, we had plans about the wars were coming to light as to what the next wars were going to be for the US. And not to mention that was not that long after the precipitating event of a lot of those wars. But additionally, then, of course, March of 2020 was when a lot of the lockdowns started happening globally due to COVID. So we may see a similar kind of extremes of information or what the coming several months are going to wind up looking for, several months plus. And this may even mark a kind of strong turning point in terms of how we're going to go forward from this point as well. Now, the lunar apogee, it is known for being a bit cold as well, just in terms of temperament and character. So we may see some kind of cold-heartedness or some distance or some almost like dehumanization or like a fear of the other, a fear of what is hidden that is somehow coming up culturally or in the discourse as well. So that is something to really keep in mind. And that is a really extraordinary thing that I was originally looking at this. I vaguely knew, okay, it's closely conjunct to Lilith, but it was actually through just paying attention to astronomical news that the astronomers were pointing out, okay, this new moon looks weird because it's so far out, basically. The lunar orbit is not exactly elliptical, and that is what that black moon Lilith represents, is the farthest away point. Now, laying out a bit more of why this is such an extraordinary new moon, we have this almost exactly conjunct to this Mercury retrograde here, and we call that Cazimi, when a planet is within about 17 minutes of exact conjunction to the sun. And this speaks of a pinnacle moment of the significations and the significance of the planet in question. So that being Mercury. This Mercury retrograde, this is the middle point of its retrograde, is right during this new moon as well. And so it's raising that planet and its significations around communication and travel and speech, connections between things, trade, commerce, etc., technologies as well. It also speaks to a point of revelation of information, which is also another matter ruled by Mercury, is just information, data, things like that. And when it hits that Cazimi, we can see that revelation of information and data, communications even. Maybe there's going to be a leak or something like this is what I would basically wind up expecting. And not only that, but then this whole configuration of the sun and the moon and Mercury here, so closely conjunct, is opposite to Uranus in the sky. And that in and of itself is a pretty huge, significant moment, which is going to speak to some major shocks and revelations in and of itself, unexpected communications, disruptions to the lines of communication, the lines of transit, travel, disruptions to technologies across the board, disruptions in information, shocking information, things like this. So we have that huge revelatory aspect of this playing out on so many different fronts here, both with the lunar apogee, the black moon Lilith there, with that Mercury Cazimi, with the fact that that's taking place in Scorpio, which itself is very penetrating and revealing of things that are hidden, right? Bringing that out into the light, purging that basically. And then there's also that shock point of Uranus right opposite to this. Now, additionally, then, that Uranus has just moved back into Taurus. It has been in Gemini for the better part of the summer here. It's going through its last little sojourn through the final degrees of Taurus before it moves permanently into Gemini. And we'll get a little bit more into what that means as well. And we also then have the participation of that Mercury retrograde. As it passes this new moon, it will in turn wind up creating a second and then a third grand trine to the very closely trine Jupiter in Cancer and Saturn in Pisces. And both of these are going to be in retrograde as well as this new moon is occurring. So this is an extraordinarily configured new moon. It's kind of mind-blowing. And so I wanted to give a little bit of time to the context here. We'll look at how this is going to play out on a global level, on a collective level, and we will dive into it on a sign-by-sign basis as well. Feel free to check for your rising sign, your sun, your moon sign. But these horoscopes are definitely designed most strongly for the rising sign. But the broader context that this is taking place within is on this day, this 20th of November as well, we have an exact sextile between the outer planets of Uranus and Neptune. These two do not configure to each other all that often. They take a very long time. So for instance, this is the first set of aspects that these two are making to each other since 1993. And you're usually going to get 5 aspects in a row between them because of their retrograde cycles. So this is the second out of 5, and this one is the only one that's going to be taking place in these signs of Taurus and Pisces. We had one already in Gemini and Aries a little bit earlier in the year in August, and then we're going to have one more next year in Gemini and Aries, and then we'll have 2 more in 2027 as well in Gemini and Aries. This is the only one which is really fundamentally backward looking. It's looking over the past. It's looking over the beliefs that we've carried and that we've been a bit disillusioned around, the changes that we are desiring to make, and yet some of the fear and unknown about the future that we may want in this moment and in this season, this winter, this context basically in which this Scorpio new moon is stepping, we may want to look back to the past for a sense of comfort. We are reviewing this for multiple reasons, I think. For one thing, to process, how have our ideas changed? How have our ideals changed? How have our values and our perspectives changed about ourselves, our own lives, and the world as well? How has culture and ideology and cultural narrative, globally speaking, how has that changed over the past 7 years, over the past 11 years, etc., as we've had Uranus in Taurus and Neptune in Pisces as well? So there is a major retrospective going on between these two, which is sharpest again on this date. It just so happens, okay, it's coinciding with the new moon. It's completely crazy here. And this is, again, the only one that we're getting in Pisces and Taurus here. Again, Uranus is back in Taurus, so this can speak to financial institutions as well as financial expectations and standards and things like this kind of getting rocked a bit again on a global scale. So we should expect some revelations of information about financial systems, about land issues, agricultural issues, food, comforts, leisure, things like this, tradition. It's all basically getting kind of shaken out of a comfort zone and potentially also on a personal, collective, or even a global level, out of a sense of grasping onto a sort of security which has kept us stuck from moving far enough forward to not feel like we're kind of stuck in this liminal state, right? So looking at those comfort zones that we've kind of gotten stuck in is going to be really helpful, but I also think that we're not going to have much choice. I think that there's just going to be some revelations around this. On a personal level, this is probably going to come through as just insights and witnessing people in our lives, situations in our lives, relationships, etc., looking a bit different than usual, and yet showing us an aspect that we may have wanted to overlook for some time. Now, the way that this Mercury retrograde is playing into all of this as well is really deeply reviewing belief systems, and not just on the short term. Typically, when we look at a Mercury retrograde, we're talking about, oh, in a couple of weeks, we might need to review that. So maybe don't get super settled into a specific decision. Because of the fact that this Mercury retrograde is going back to participate in a grand trine, 3 actually grand trines with Jupiter and Saturn, this isn't just short-term stuff. This is deeply reviewing long-term plans. What are our values? What are our long-term desires as well? And of course, we can have all of the standard Mercury retrograde stuff going on as well. This can really highlight where there's been miscommunications, misunderstandings, revisions, delays, things like this, as well as breakdowns that may have already occurred, or this new moon may wind up spurring on with regard to communications or information or data or transit or exchange, things like this. So we should expect some confusion and some breakdowns with all of that because of that Mercury being retrograde, in addition to it being, of course, opposite to that Uranus as well, really amplifying that. And of course, with these Grand Water Trines, this has also been pushing us to get in touch again with our personal value systems, and that which basically offers us some sense of knowing where we stand on certain issues. And I mean that in a very broad sense. So knowing where we stand foundationally, but also knowing where we stand in terms of our beliefs and on what convictions are we willing to stand as well. I think that that is also really coming into this. This is also really emphasizing the need to take care of each other, the need for compassion, the need to bring human emotion back into a situation, and a desire to connect, which may feel melancholic at times. But keeping in mind, again, that lunar apogee that is bound up with all of this at this point, this may feel fundamentally like something we deeply desire and yet is lacking. Like there's some reason that we can't tune into that sense of human emotion. This is very detached as a kind of point in the sky. This is where we feel like we are kind of separated or untethered from the connections that we really desire to make, especially in Scorpio and participating with this heavy water energy that we've had on an emotionally connective level with other people too. So there may be a sense of melancholy or heartbreak that is built into this as well. And I do think we're going to see a lot of that on a global scale. I think we've already seen some of that. And this is likely to be a new kind of height to that as well, which shouldn't last forever. But typically these new moons, full moons, they will have some impact over basically the whole month. So it is marking the season. And this is a very distinctively emotional and yet a bit melancholic, reflective season as a whole. And this is really underlining that. Now, we also have the context of the fact that Pluto remains out of bounds at this point. So this speaks to matters of abnormal exercise of power or extremes of corruption, especially financially. and in terms of governance and things like this. So we can see that potentially play into this as well. This can also speak to the misuse or abuse of collectives that can wind up leading to a downfall of leadership and the powers that be. So this can speak to corruption reaching such a point that it winds up contributing to some kind of a downfall as well. There is also, with this on a personal level, beyond potentially seeing that in our personal lives as well. So those who misuse, abuse power, those who manipulate and things like this, especially those who participate in that on a kind of systems or groups of people level, like triangulation, things like that, are likely to be revealed throughout this time. So if you know someone who participates in that quite a bit, this may be a moment where other people are starting to see that as well. But again, on a personal level, aside from all of that, this Pluto out of bounds does offer an ability to utilize a lot of self-empowerment on a personal level, also on a collective level between people, populations, as well as a heightened level of self-control is available to us as well with that Pluto out of bounds. But our impulses will also be that much more heightened. So it's very important to utilize that self-control. This is also taking place within the context of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which is also playing out throughout this season, which speaks to the kind of falling away of old institutions and structures and narratives about the world, the economy, and people, and how things have been founded and how things are standing. Basically, there's an old guard, an old way, which is falling away right now, which is making room for something new and something that is going to make a lot more sense for us going forward to be able to lean into and actually take hold of. So think of that as the old guard is falling away as well. Now, fortunately, zooming out a little bit, we also have one other thing that hasn't quite occurred yet. And you can see I have my orbs open pretty wide, but we do have Venus also coming through this area afterward. So after this new moon, after we just had Mars coming through this area, during this Mercury retrograde, it will be meeting up with Venus just before it's about to go direct as well. And so on the other side of this new moon, with Venus coming through this area, joining up with that Mercury as it's turning direct, we should have much, much more clarity about how we can effectively move forward by that point, which is going to be late November into early December. That's also, I'm pretty sure, when we have Pluto coming out of its out of bounds state. And so maybe on the other side of this, there are some agreements made about how to manage what has seemed like a potentially chaotic upheaval during this period of time. And it's likely that there's going to be a feeling of sort of hung over by December time from all of the movement and all of the revelations and all of the kind of information overload and the twists and turns in the direction that we feel like we're taking, and having to constantly stay on our toes and be flexible, look backward deeply, but also try not to lose our footing. It's been a really intense kind of a period of time throughout the Scorpio season. So it's likely that as we get into December, it's going to feel like a bit of a release. But again, I can't help but look at that and see it looks a little bit hungover, right? So with that broader context covered, let's look at this on a kind of global level, specifically this new moon. So, of course, shocks, surprises are to be expected. Expect the unexpected, to use the cliche. This does speak to something of a very explosive new beginning, a clean slate, which will appear like a kind of purge. So there's an attempt to clear the air. There's an attempt to clean the slate. And yet in the midst of that, and possibly through that process as well, something from the past is rearing its head. And so this may be ideological in nature. We may be trying to clear that slate ideologically, maybe put some either ideologies to rest or to address some of the fallout from some of that, or set that aside so that we can connect better and exchange better with that Mercury being that planet of exchange and bringing things together. There can be some really like fresh thoughts and innovative ideas that are going to come through here. And many are going to be looking for new forms of comfort and security or connection and merging through this moment as well with this new moon. There's likely also to be emerging some new intellectual fascinations, curiosities. This may be a height around like memes and wordplay and things like this that's a little bit dark and maybe tinged with a bit of the sardonic, but really to the point as well. Really interesting, weird, potentially a little bit upsetting news stories around this period of time as well. But there is this kind of, again, purification or purging process that's underway with this. And yet, again, just to punctuate this, there's something of a seedy underbelly that is coming to the fore here, as well as some attempt being made to cover things up or keep things hidden as well. So it's going to be a bit of a push and pull, and we may feel with that Mercury Cazimi like we're kind of in the eye of the storm as well, where there's this kind of sudden clarity, and yet we know that there's more coming that we're going to need to deal with and that we're going to need to wade through and organize and try and sort out and make sense of. Now, again, there's likely to be issues also coming up during that time around communication, governance, transportation, transit, media, diplomacy as well. And so there may be a kind of critical realization or revelation that emerges amid a kind of general confusion, a sense of a kind of reset in that moment around narratives. So a new story, basically, a new narrative emerging. This may speak to a completely new direction in terms of policy that's seated around this point, perhaps especially involving, again, media, technology, discourse, even economic policy with Uranus now back in Taurus too. And so we may see as well during this time the birth of a new narrative as well, which would make sense given the kinds of implications here around also trying to control a narrative. So if there's one that is coming to light and it is not as supportive as maybe an old narrative to certain people who have a lot of control or power or something like this, then that attempt to control it or that attempt to hide it or brush it aside or dismiss it could wind up coming through as well. And we do see that in the alignments here. This could, again, speak to new leaders or the rise of new public movements as well. That Cazimi is speaking to the communicative aspect of this, or its ability to bridge, being unusually potent, unusually inspired, though we may not see fully how this is going to wind up playing out until we see that Mercury wind up going direct again as well. So I would be watching for statements coming out from government or from political leaders. There could be whistleblower revelations, major news stories or retractions or things like this, negotiations that are really pivotal that may seem kind of confusing at this point, but wind up becoming very consequential as well. And again, there's this kind of attempt to then control or shape that narrative or that message there. And I do feel like there is almost certainly an attempted cover-up here, and maybe even destroying evidence. Maybe a major factor here as well. But I don't think that that's going to wind up working ultimately. Another way that we can see this wind up playing out is these kind of extreme ideas or words as well. So this can provide some weirdly sharp, again, kind of penetrating insight into troubled minds through the crude words that they use, or through the words that they use, which are clearly intended to stoke fear or emotional or psychological manipulation as well, and very disturbed or twisted messages too. So that kind of fear mongering and all of the yucky kind of cultural attachments to seeing like one's enemies suffer could wind up rising to the surface around this period of time, or wind up kind of permeating the energy. So regardless of what side we're on, if we can hopefully not participate in that kind of a thing, of not looking at things from a perspective of I'm wishing for the best, at least for those that I care about, if not for all involved, at least not getting oneself and one's mind into participating in the difficult game that's going on globally right now about wanting for there to be suffering of people who disagree that I think has been very culturally damaging and toxic. And I think that this looks like it's going to wind up bringing that to the fore in a very consequential way as well. So this could wind up in turn representing the start of a longer term project to infuse that kind of thing, that kind of yucky way of looking at humanity in groups of enemy, like friend and foe, that could kind of heighten around perhaps a specific kind of a group as well. So really try to be on the lookout for that and try to brush that aside with that kind of sardonic response and leaning into those water grand trines of compassion and humanity rather than fighting hate with hate. Now, do what you want, but I'm just going to give advice based on what I'm seeing astrologically here. So again, shocking information as well coming out through this. So weird news stories I would really expect. Also flashes of insight and intuition and downloads and spiritual connection on perhaps a mass level as well, hopefully. So this kind of broad enlightenment as well. A lot of people who are maybe vaguely aware of spiritual connection or whatever may really have their minds lit up around this period of time as well. And what this offers, interestingly, and I might recommend kind of leaning into this a bit, especially if you get mad or upset over certain stories or things like that, developments that wind up coming out. One thing about that conjunction with the lunar apogee, that black moon Lilith there, is that this can give us the ability to look at things from a distance. And detachment, I think, here can offer a really wonderful perspective on the reality of things and give us the kind of 30,000-foot view, basically, of what is developing throughout this time. And the surprises that come up, if we don't knee-jerk react to them and get right down into the mud with it immediately, those surprises may wind up introducing questions or making us think differently. So I would lean into, again, those that are encouraging us to just kind of take a broader view, look at things from a bit of a perspective of these things are not set in stone. This is just a revelation, and we're going to have to act at some point to clean up what does look like a mess around these revelations as well. And so we're going to have to keep our head on straight and not get into the same games that we're trying to clean up around this period of time as a global humanity, right? So again, hidden knowledge or leaks as well, that Mercury Cazimi bringing insights up potentially from the past as well, and maybe even from the deep past, considering we're not far off from these trines with Saturn, which speaks to a deep past. This is all of tradition, basically, is what that can speak to. But it is also very institutional as well. So institutional histories and things like this. And then Jupiter retrograde in Cancer there, that can speak for one thing in the United States, perhaps particularly. And I know that this has implications globally as well. But looking at that as this is our Jupiter return as the US, and Jupiter does speak to, on some level, constitutions and things like this. And so we may see something spoken to there as well, looking back at that. And there may be being these kinds of insights that come from that or about that. Hidden information, or for instance, maybe this is even judgments in courts. I'm going to, unashamedly just take a little bit of a detour US wise right now for just a minute. But maybe there are certain judgments or something like this in the courts that are leaning heavily on constitutional law and that may wind up really cementing or pulling up precedents that we haven't looked at for some time as well. There may be some like kind of long lost document or long lost previous judgments coming to light as well that we're starting to look at again. So it's hard to keep track of all of the precedent of US law, right? And again, this doesn't just have to be about the US. I am kind of leaning into the fact that that's the Jupiter return there. This can also be the case in all different countries as well. So not to mention just kind of globally, maybe there are some long lost documents or some hidden information or something like that that isn't specifically to do with governance that also winds up coming to light and winds up bringing us some insights from the past as well. Old ideas are also going to be resurfacing quite a bit in collective awareness. So again, maybe many different nations on the political level, maybe we are going back into our history a bit and looking at, well, when this and this and this event happened, we weren't really thinking about that recently, but these people were saying this and they had this kind of a perspective on how things were going to play out, et cetera, et cetera. And so we may see, for instance, maybe there's something about the founding fathers that is significant here, or please feel free to apply that to your own national context as well. So this can look certainly like historical revisionism, but there can also be that just general kind of reanalysis of the past, perhaps of treaties, of matters of reworking constitutions, either in the States or anywhere, of course. There could be some major lawsuits reopening as well that could be indicated here, as well as exposure of corruption. And that may not just have to be corruption that's currently ongoing. That could be a past thing as well, or reaching quite deeply into the past, or a pattern of corruption that is being pointed to here as well. Now, when we're dealing with heavy Scorpio Taurus energy as well, we do wind up with these matters of security and insecurity coming up too. So that is sharpened kind of under this influence as well, at least on that emotional level, the emotional reactivity of desire and comfort, desiring security and being anxious about it, being anxious about losing that. So matters of fear and security are likely to be coming up, and this could be impacting leaders, populations, thoughts, our collective thoughts as well, could be skewed in that direction. Our words may be reflecting a kind of internal insecurity as well. The speech and publications, the media, documents, laws may be very strongly speaking to matters of security or insecurity around this period of time. And there may be a lack of that as well when it comes to travel or transit or movement as well. There could also be intense disruptions across those areas too. And I am hearing that may be the case, especially when it comes to flights in the States. And if that issue was not sorted out before the holidays, this moon is going to be just before the U.S. Thanksgiving as well. So this could really be speaking quite directly to that. And I do worry about that a little bit. So hopefully that gets sorted out and it's just the usual issues, But also I'm hoping that there's not a weird sense of a rug pull. But that was kind of an intuitive thing that I was also picking up with this as well. Additionally, when it comes to fear and security, threatening language or threatening maneuvers, which are intended to elicit a submissive response out of fear of something, could also really play into this as well. And again, there's a kind of manipulative or fear-mongering aspect to this, and there may be some clarity around the psychological dynamics that are going on with that through slip-ups in language or through extremely impactful words as well. And in that, I am partly looking at the sextile to Pluto, but that also does have to do quite strongly with, in particular, this degree, this 28 degrees of Scorpio, as well as the third decan of Scorpio. They tend to coincide along those lines around matters of domination and matters of needing to purge and have some sense of mercy and release as well. So additionally, likely to have matters of scandal and accountability coming up, so impropriety. There could be information or news that's coming out about some impropriety, which is causing a scandal, which is causing people to call for accountability around that. And this may have difficult, seedy, darker aspects of life, exploitation undertones to it, is what I'm kind of expecting there, as well as emotional manipulation and fear and stuff like that of populations. Also likely to be just a period of time that is quite volatile as well. So shocking extremes of behavior, of reactivity, again, insight into troubled minds, very impulsive decision making also around this time. So let's not be those people that wind up doing that. And let's hopefully maybe not react knee-jerk necessarily. Let's think things through at least for a moment before responding to the poor judgment of impulsive decision-making that we're witnessing out world as well. And part of the issue here is that, yes, this is a moment of like sharpened clarity with that Mercury Cazimi. Aside from this, that Mercury is mostly going to be what we would call under the beams or combust it'll be combust for a little while, which makes things very difficult to see. So there are things that are going on in the dark. There are things that are hidden. This can bring some of that straight out into the open, but there's still a context there that needs to get sorted out, and which is probably going to take some time until Mercury winds up going direct about 9 days later and winds up crossing through this area of the sky again as well. So there may be basically a deep sense of uncertainty globally, especially in markets or in the media or with regard to diplomacy and relations like this. A lot of decisions being made around this period of time behind closed doors. And this could be financial in nature, but with the Scorpio aspect to this, there could also be issues here around propaganda, fears, or martial matters like war decisions as well. On a collective level, maybe not quite as rough. This is one of the more complicated new moons of the year. Probably, aside from the eclipses, I think this is the most distinctive, if I'm remembering correctly, of this year. And so I do want to kind of point that out. It is, I know that I just said a lot of rough stuff. I can't hold that back, but that is very much the way that this looks globally. On a more collective, people-oriented, all of our experiences kind of level, there is again that clean slate purging aspect to this, which is coming through. So there is again that attempt of a clean slate, but something from the past kind of rearing its head, or even something from the past interfering. And maybe there is also then, we're trying to create a clean slate, and yet we're ruminating or caught upon something from the past that feels like it's keeping us stuck in that mind state that we're trying to purge, that we're trying to create a clean slate around as well. And this is part of the broader Mercury retrograde and the way that it's aligning with Jupiter and Saturn as well. So this is just like, again, looking into the deep past in order to clean it up, in order to find what lessons and what understanding, what knowledge, what wisdom we can glean from that usefully, while purging a lot of the old foundations and old limitations and old even ideals or dreams that don't quite align anymore and that would be best left in the past as well. So there's also with this area an energy of like fantasy or desires. And so there is a risk here of getting caught up in that fantasy. So it's going to be pretty imperative that we try to stay grounded during this period of time, as there's likely to be really extreme levels of sentiment and internal thoughts, in addition to extremes of the words that people are using. So it's the mind is in an extreme state. It is in a very sentimental and emotionally charged state. The words will also wind up reflecting that, and not just our own words, but the ones that we're encountering from other people too. So this is going to be bringing up matters of elucidating our desires in terms of our own minds, and where some of that maybe has slipped into wishful thinking or fantasy, or wishing for something that is outside of us and wanting to bring that under our control, but that it would be best if we did not, because we cannot control the uncontrollables. And that's one thing that this is really going to wind up teaching us. So also really watching our words is going to be very important here. So try not, this is a Mercury retrograde rule of thumb. It is especially important when we have it in this weird area of the sky where our words can really betray the shadow aspect of us as well. So try not to say things that cannot be taken back, especially which are tinged with ego or malice as well. Try to keep your eyes open as well for manipulation or for that kind of thing coming out of other people's mouths too. And also try your best not to hold on to, not to grasp onto the dark thoughts that wind up arising here. Try to just, when they do inevitably arise here and there, these kinds of intrusive thoughts, right? And things like that. with this energy, just try to let them pass. Just try not to grasp onto them. They are not a part of you. They're just an energy that's flowing through you. Just let them pass. Definitely avoid letting the intrusive thoughts win. Watch your words. Also, I think really worth having a rule that if the words that you are going to say are hateful, which that should be easy to check in on, even if it's hateful about something that is hateful, right? Maybe take a step back. Maybe ask ourselves, is that the kind of energy that I want to be infusing into the world? Or do I want to clean up that energy before I release it, right? So very important, I think, to be doing that around this broader period of time, but especially during this Mercury Cazimi there. Also very much an energy of turning inward here too. So if we can attempt to channel this kind of clean slate energy effectively, what we'll basically be doing is turning inward for clarification on what we can recognize and glean about our own desire nature. So what is it that we're trying to control? What is it that we're trying to get to look like what we want it to look like, and getting really kind of fixated upon that? What are those desires which have gone kind of in that bad way, right? Looking at those, especially around control over others, or an unhealthy level of control, or domination or domineering even of yourself. So those negative thoughts, that negative self-talk as well, is going to be a big factor here, I think. That which basically we do not possess as well, trying to control that. Even trying to control aspects of ourselves that we feel that we've kind of lost some heavy-handed control over. What's interesting about that is I think that we are kind of getting put in touch with a sense of true alignment, or where we really are right now, internally, emotionally, and we're going to need to work on our emotions from that level. We can't just spiritually bypass here, is basically what I think this is also kind of pointing to. So it'll also be turning inward for clarification around our fears, around our shadow, around what may feel like it may pull us in or pull us under, and our instinctive reactions to those matters. So sometimes we can really worry about getting sucked into something, which there is a risk of here. So keeping in mind that this is a thought process kind of level thing. Paying attention to what does suck us in and pull us under, basically into a depression or into a fear state or into stress. News can do that quite a bit recently, right? So looking at that, and then just evaluate your instinctive reaction. What are those emotions? What do they look like? And how maybe can you rewire some of those reactions? I know that it's so simple, but I remember hearing about a practice that is weirdly helpful for grounding, where when you find yourself in an anxious state or an ungrounded state, to utilize your physical senses to remind yourself that you are in a space that is safe, that you're actually fine and safe, and you don't need to be in a fight or flight mode. So basically you wind up notating multiple things that you can see around you, just looking at, okay, these are the things that I can see. This is the kind of visual texture of them. This is how the light is kind of playing upon the physical things around me. Touch, what is it that you can feel? Are there different textures around you that you can ground yourself in basically by touch? And what are 3 things that you can hear? And then focusing in and grounding on those things that you can hear, and so on. Like, what can you smell around you? And that's just basically pulling you back into that physical space, which is in that moment safe, right? In reality. So that may be kind of helpful for some of us if this does wind up playing out in a very weird way, right? So if we can kind of purge around these areas, purify as much as we can our minds, as well as, and this is a tall order, we're not going to get all of this done just in one season, but it is opening the door, right? There's an energy of being able to purge and purify our minds, our spirits as well, our sense of our purpose, our instincts and our reactions, as well as our environments. So this would also be a really great energy under which to clear and cleanse ourselves energetically, our spaces energetically, to release the past, and especially to really radically release attachments as well, like unhealthy attachments, right? So again, trying not to hold on to specific hard-coded kinds of outcomes. Hopefully we can then allow for something better that may wind up coming in if we can remain flexible, if we can remain considerate and compassionate toward ourselves and toward others, and to not feel a need under this influence to win over others. I think that it would be best if we are not planting those seeds during this season, even though, all of the weird energies, there are lots of names for those things, are going to be, encouraging that under this kind of an alignment here. So there's a major potential here for a meaningful ego death to whatever extent that we are accepting of that, and which will wind up leaving us feeling perhaps energetically a bit worked over, but then better able to move forward without so much baggage. So again, just a little reminder to ground yourself as well. These kind of quick alignments of back to back of the planets to these others may have us feeling very disoriented or overstimulated, pulled in multiple directions. So grounding, focusing on practicality, and focusing on release is going to be really key here. And so this would be a really good time to pull back from unnecessary distractions, especially if there is a completely nutso kind of news story that is breaking around this time. I think it's great to keep in mind, I try and remind myself about this because I can be a bit of a news junkie at times. The news is going to be there and it's going to be in a clearer state later on, right? All of the things that I'm like refreshing and trying to figure out, okay, did we get a, insight onto that? No, those are unknowns for now. Come back to it later, right? Especially come back to it when you have regrounded yourself. And again, there's this clarity to come. So we're not fully permanently in this state. We get to do this emotional clearing throughout this period of time. The next step is going to be Venus coming through this area that is going to help us to clear this up, to look on the positive side of this, to look at what is very helpful, what does harmonize for us, what is aligned with us, how we can connect and exchange in a way that feels more satisfying than it has for some time. And also then, this is working us over emotionally, spiritually, internally, so that when we go into highly, highly active energies next year, and that's going to go on for years then that we're going to be dealing with that, then we can be more cleared, more purified, more able to control our emotions and our reactions, less reactive, basically, for when we're dealing with the real action that's coming next year, especially next summer. So the more of the internal work that we can do now, the better able we will be next summer to roll with the punches and not have all of our own internal baggage getting us identifying on a very personal level and taking very personally, and then therefore reacting in an extreme instinctive fight or flight kind of way where it shuts down the mind and causes us to behave irrationally. Then we can respond basically to the active state next year less irrationally, right? That's what I'm trying to say there. So in summary, basically, this is going to be big time about accepting release, especially to emotional aspects of our lives that we've been holding on to, those emotional stories that we hold about our lives, about our past, about our connections, but which keep us kind of stuck and keep us tied to emotional baggage. So also cord cutting. This would be super good, super helpful for cord cutting. This is the energy under which you would really want to do that. Matters coming to light are going to be a big thing. Trying to be flexible and to avoid holding on to specific outcomes, I think, is also going to be helpful here. There's a lot of emotional processing, which is very well supported, but which we may resist in a knee-jerk kind of way. So again, when those difficult thoughts or when those things from the past or when that rumination kind of starts to kick in, we may instinctively block it to not deal with it, but better, I think, to just kind of look at it, let it flow over and let it be released as well. So we can move forward a lot more lightly and with clearer insights on what we truly want if we can accept that we cannot control the uncontrollables, which is to say, basically everything that is not within us. All that we can really control is ourselves and our own reactions and our own attitudes toward life, right? So focusing really strongly on staying in our own lane and focusing on what we can work with productively in this moment, even on an emotional level. How can we work with that emotion in a way that's going to be pretty productive and constructive for us going forward as well? But yeah, I think that that is a lot of what I have about this Scorpio new moon. It's going to be kind of a big deal. It's going to be, a little destabilizing, I think, for a moment there. But there's a lot that we can work with this that is a very distinctive energy that we don't always have available. Like I said, this is the farthest moon in general, let alone the fact that it's a new moon, which is going to be taking place for almost 20 years until 2043. So that as well, the Mercury Cazimi new moon is very weird. The fact that this is opposite to Uranus and Taurus, we're never going to experience that again. So this is an energy that we have once that we get to work with. And so, I do hope that we will try to make the best of it and try and roll with however it's going to look on the global stage as well. So yeah, with all of that said, thank you all so much for spending this time with me. I do greatly appreciate it. And if you don't mind giving the video a thumbs up or a hype, really greatly appreciate it. It does help to spread the video around, and do consider subscribing for future videos like this where we look at various transits and how they are going to be impacting us based on our own charts. And thank you so much to the members of this channel for your support. So thank you so much to Angel Niblock, JJ, Michelle Howell, Deborah Kale-Leavitt, Patrick McKenney, Jody, Anne Marie, C. Rezer, Peace Out, Rachel Windholtz, The Z-Man 1291, Aya, Lynn Newman, Long T Standing, The Nelson Cat Maya, Honey DiMartino, Dolly Geezy, Mango JT, Be Love, Startlingly True, Grace, Psyche Lloyd, Noah, Aquarian Antiquarian, Susan Martin, Jonathan Mason, Chad Wiseman, Ezekiel David LaRosa, SP, Teresa Jones, Sherry Lees, Horse Dog Dog Notebook, Nioke Beam, Justice League Pie, Ashley Gonzalez, Create, Gales Tarot and Astrology, Talitha McKenzie, K from NH, Patar Music, Denise Sanine, Pat K, Nancy Imhoff, Travis Dandro, Sunny, Peta Carlin, Sarah M. Cap, Angela Lazaire, Jane Bevan, Elizabeth Drew, Helena Fisher, MD, Lori Clinchard, Tina Reynolds, Sacred Alpaca, Tanis Miller, Tanya Napolitano, Natasha P., Taylor Indy Loon, Susie Fetter, Via T., Linda Skull, Marnouche Amiri, Novocaine, ML, Mari Garcia, D. Fish, Sabrina Nettles, Energetics with J, and Someone77. Thank you so much again for your support. Much love to you. And if you are interested in memberships, there is information in the description box below. And other than all that, let's go ahead and get into the sign by sign. All right, so for Aries, we have the new moon in Scorpio taking place in your 8th house. And the 8th house has to do with shared resources and the other people that you're dealing with, sometimes getting into entanglements with them, your commitments, that which other people are kind of bringing to the table. This can also be a very esoteric place, as well as a place dealing with more complicated topics around vulnerability and trust and things like this. So this can be a period of time which is really great for purging debts, and that can be either financial or karmic or emotional. So really looking at where you feel like there is any sort of an imbalance for you, be it material or emotional or spiritual, and bringing that into balance. So whether that be removing certain energies or things like that from your life, whether it be deciding to, pay something off and maybe it's credit card and then like no longer using it or something like this, or if it is no longer giving in to something that just seems to take and take and take from you, be it again a person or some kind of a spending habit or something like this. So dealing with the underlying baggage of that and releasing that throughout this period of time as well. So for you, this is likely to be very deep, deep, deep purging through this new moon. Also, potential big truths revealed in partnerships. This can be a place where other people can kind of hide things, where they can be holding on to things. And I would very much expect for that kind of a thing to be coming out either directly or indirectly, possibly even just instinctively on your part, where you kind of suddenly know that something's going on with someone or that there's more to some kind of a story. And you may just be kind of tapping into that, or you might be being told about that, or someone could be coming clean about something. Basically, just truths, information about your entanglements with other people and what they are bringing to the table around those kinds of matters. So yeah, very intense in terms of emotional processing around matters of vulnerability and trust, especially if there's something that's coming to light that is less than fully comfortable. This may be causing you to look at where you have opened up to other people, or why you might shut down to certain people, where you may trust too much or too little, etc. And there may need to be a kind of reaching out to or leaning on someone here that additionally puts you in touch with how is it that you wind up relating to others? Do you have trust for others, and for whom? And are you able to be vulnerable either to yourself or other people? And also embracing, like, it can be really difficult when truths come out about certain connections that we've had. It can be really difficult to accept that, because often we can then look at it as some kind of a personal failing, or like we left ourselves open to something. And just embracing the fact that you're a vulnerable human being, and that sometimes that lets certain things in, and that doesn't have to reflect on you, even though you can learn from it, right? So how do you take the lesson without leaning into negative thinking, again, especially personalized negative thinking, like toward yourself? Again, releasing the uncontrollables. This is a place, again, of other people's resources. So you can't really control that. And this is likely to be bringing up areas where you need to release either connections with others, access to resources of others, or your ties in some way to others, and especially around their healing or their behavior or their perspectives on certain things, or their trust, their vulnerability. We can't control that in other people. And sometimes people, I'm going to approach this from a pretty specific angle with a pretty specific example. But for instance, if you are trying to help someone to heal, or if you're trying to guide someone, we can't control whether people are going to be accepting of good guidance. And we can't make people make good decisions. And we can't make people be more responsible with their lives, or we can't make people clean up their thoughts and things like that. And we can't control that. So other people are going to have to do their part. And if something that you're realizing under this influence is that someone isn't, and that you're putting a bunch of your resources into, it's going to be a strong term, but like a lost cause, basically, then you may really decide that you want to pull that back. And sometimes people react strongly, because sometimes people just kind of want that fed. They want to be worked on. They want to be reassured. They want to be, receiving the attention of someone that's trying to heal them without doing any of the work on their own. And so there may need to be a bit of a confrontation there, hopefully with a lot of honesty about expectations and things like this as well. So I would really recommend focusing most strongly on your side of any commitments. Again, what is controllable? It's you and your side of commitments, and how you will behave in any given situation. We can't really control anything other than that, for better or worse. So making sure that you are being very responsible with your resources, that there's not too many resource leakages as well, is one of the ways that you could look at, like, focusing and putting your energy into someone who's not fixing themselves as well, like this kind of leakage or seeping out of energy in a non-productive, non-constructive direction, right? This can also speak to any sort of esoteric topics, or around divination, or around getting more in touch with this almost spiritual connections, maybe to ancestors or to other spirits that are kind of outside of yourself, and communing basically along those lines. This can also kick off a very deeply, fundamentally honest connection and commitment with someone, where it's going to be really imperative, if a relationship basically starts under this influence, that it be fully honest and that your expectations be really like put out there on the table as well. I wouldn't recommend so much starting a financial commitment under this. We've got that Mercury retrograde, we've got that Uranus in the second house, opposite to those placements. It's very unlikely that you would have the whole story if you were to like start a loan or something like that under this influence. I would wait for sure. But yeah, I think that that is a lot of what I would want to point out here, Aries, for this new moon for you. So I hope it treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right. So for Taurus, we have the new moon in Scorpio in your seventh house. And this house has to do with the other people in your life, especially close one-on-one connections. So romantic partnerships, close friends, business partners, people like this. And so this new moon is likely to be speaking to a very powerful release of a partnership dynamic, how you approach certain connections. You may be realizing that there are some emotional complications to that. So there may be some lessons here or some revelations here around a codependency or issues of over-reliance either upon you or upon others for some sense of assurance or affirmation. There may be an outdated relationship pattern that's basically being released as well. So how it is that you tend to connect with people. Do you tend to put yourself aside? Do you tend to not quite speak up about your expectations, your standards? Do you sometimes expect for people to step up in certain ways that they don't? Is there a bit of difficulty about explaining, about being really honest about your expectations, maybe out of a fear that there's going to be a rejection there or something like that? So there may be a need to really let go of what's no longer in alignment with yourself at this point. And a lot of this is going to be speaking to that Uranus that's been in your first house for the past 7 years. And it's been changing fundamentally who you are, but you might be dealing still with some outdated relationship dynamics that are not quite as liberated in how they play out than you are in and of yourself and in your own personality and in how you are approaching things. So you may have people who are leaning on you in a way that speaks to an old version of yourself that would really try and just lift people up regardless and, you know, basically just kind of give in, et cetera, et cetera. So again, there's a partnership dynamic or a relationship pattern or something here that is being kind of exposed in order to be purified and purged and released so that you can go forward in your relationship dynamics in a way that feels more aligned with this new version of yourself that you have created over the past 7 years with Uranus in your first. This could also speak to the release of a contract. So there could be an agreement that you've made or a contract or a legal concern where it's either stepping into a different kind of a phase or a different way, like a renegotiation or something like this, where it's basically a different, I don't know how to refer to that, like a different stage in a contract or a release of it, like a letting go of some kind of a contract as well. And that could even be perceived as like a karmic contract with someone. So you may be purging as well a specific person that has been quite significant to you as well. And again, I mentioned it in the general, but if you need to do any sort of cord cutting or something like that to someone that you feel continues to be in your energy and doesn't really have any business being so, then that may be wise to do some kind of a cord cutting ritual or something like this as well. Always using energetic protection and, hygiene and making sure that you're really safe with that as well. Follow all the rules. That's what I always recommend. Also, potentially a very pivotal conversation with someone in a partnership as well, connecting with someone that may be bringing some kind of forgotten insight or a forgotten aspect of a relationship to light. So this could be through a conversation directly with someone, or it could just be a realization and insight that you're getting about someone that you're connected to, maybe something negative potentially about them, about where they're coming from, maybe some negative habits or tendencies that they have. I'll leave it at that. that maybe you're not super comfortable with, or maybe it's underhanded tactics of a business partner or something like this. Maybe it is mismanagement of financial resources or something like this, or even mismanagement in a personal partnership of emotional resources of the people around. So you may be seeing a different, not so great side of someone as an insight. Now, you may also, though, be getting an insight on your own desire nature when it comes to other people, and any sort of control or power dynamic stuff that goes on with that, either on your part, straightforwardly, that could definitely be an aspect of this, or from your desire to connect, giving into controlling or power dynamic heavy connections at times as well. So really looking at that, I think, is going to be quite helpful, and it may just really come up kind of out of the blue as well. So I would say just be as flexible with the outcome of these connections where you're having these insights as you can, because it's likely that some of those really close partnerships are going undergoing rather a redefinition. So there's also a lot of like deep emotional processing about your role in relationships as well. So you may have some resistance to that knee jerk of really looking at how you participate in certain relationships and connections and things like this. And that resistance may be because of a desire to cling to a sense of stability within your partnerships and relationships. But of course, really best to keep in mind when we're dealing with these heavy Scorpio energies that the best way to deal with them is through accepting that really necessary transformation and looking at things really, truly honestly, because when we let things just be and when we resist the transformation that Scorpio brings in, things can fester and they can wind up getting quite a bit worse as well. Also, really keeping in mind that we can't control other people. That's going to be a big thing here, is like you can't really control your partner's actions or their decisions, even if they're doing something that's bad for them. It can be a difficult thing to let go of trying to help someone, trying to heal someone, trying to be there for someone, and trying to see them through to the other side of something that they're doing, which they may or may not realize is an issue. And you probably do. But even if they feign to or do really see what the problem is, if they're not putting in the effort to clear that up themselves, you can't drag them to that. So that is, I think, also going to be something that's going to be really important to keep in mind, is only controlling the controllables, which is you and your reactions to things and what you are putting your energy into. And so try not to give a bunch of energy, especially if you're going to later resent it, into something that is not constructive and not productive as well. And releasing that control can also grant you a huge amount of clarity on what you truly do want and need in your one-on-one connections as well, which is probably going to be a bigger aspect of reciprocity, right? Mutual support. Additionally, then focusing again on staying in your own lane by really examining how it is that you show up in relationships, what you truly desire in relationships, allowing for that to be what it is, other than control of others, because that's not a good place to come from with this, but allowing for that and not trying to make yourself into something else because you think that that may help your partnerships in some way, and also not ignoring if someone's not showing up in the way that you need for them to, trying not to sweep that under the rug and just kind of continue with that out of a fear of rejection or loneliness or alienation or something like that as well. Again, honesty is going to be really important here. And working really productively as well on your like communication and compromise skills too. And again, trying not to like fix other people, I think is going to be really important. But communicating honestly, I think is going to be really excellent with this for you. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Taurus. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Gemini, we have the new moon in Scorpio taking place in your 6th house. And this is the house of routine, of working schedules, of your working life, like tasks, mundane tasks, and things like this. This also is a place of health and those kinds of considerations as well. So this is a very mundane house. It has to do, again, with your habits and your tasks and things like that. So there is a need to release a kind of daily routine, or to really look at that for any of the complications, any of the edges around it that are not helpful, that are not constructive, that are not productive, that might not be healthy. Also looking at your health regimens in this way, or any sort of unhelpful habits, bad habits that you may have that need to be looked at and probably need to be released. If not in whole, then at least in part. Examining those and kind of trying to get to the bottom of it and trying to purge and purify those things. So surrendering a lot, what is no longer serving your well-being, is really the name of the game here. And that's what's underpinning all of this. But it's likely that these things are going to be annoying, right? So if there's an issue with your routine or with habits, it's likely to be extra annoying during this period of time, as a way of pointing itself out as this needs to be changed, or this needs to be purified, it needs to be purged or released, or something like this. It needs to be reworked, basically, so that it can be clearer, more efficient, more effective, and healthier as well, is really what we're looking at here. And so there may be as well a very key insight or piece of information about your working life, your job, your health, a coworker, an employee, or something like this that winds up resurfacing. Even, again, very mundane issues. I find that there is a whole plethora of things that can come through in the sixth house around things like documentation or information, or things that you kind of forgot about because it was in the background. Basically, it was just like an omnipresent thing. And so we can kind of overlook it, the way that we can get basically into autopilot. All the different aspects of the autopilot life can show up here. So there's, with regard to a very mundane aspect of life, likely to be a very key insight or a piece of information that makes itself very much known. So be very open to revisiting all of those mundane details of your life. I know it doesn't sound too fun. It's probably not the most thrilling thing in the world, but when this area of life is going better than it otherwise could be, it really makes a huge difference in the rest of the life, because of the fact that we're not then bogged down by all of the crap that we don't want to be dealing with. That's kind of what the sixth house is the crap we don't want to deal with, right? So the better that we can get that sorted out, very clear about that, not making assumptions, getting our expectations clear, getting our communication clear about what's expected of us, and so on and so forth. That's all going to be really, really helpful here. So also being really open to being flexible when it comes to your workflow, when it comes to your routine and things like that. Maybe shake it up even. I mean, this doesn't just have to be a drudgery kind of a thing. It can be that you have an unhealthy routine if it's so boring that you find your day to be kind of draining, right? Whereas that doesn't necessarily have to be the case if you can infuse something that is a bit more spirited, or a bit raising of your spirits as well. Even if it's just an intention that you're setting now and waiting for Venus to come through this area and kind of clarify how to do that. Maybe bringing some messages that it recently, was working with in your fifth house. Maybe bringing that to the situation around what actually pleases you, what is enjoyable, and bringing that more into your everyday life, instead of insisting upon just working through the old methods of doing things, so remaining flexible, either in order to make things more efficient and to make things better, or even to infuse a little bit more joy into your day-to-day life as well. A lot of the emotional processing that's going to be happening here is going to be focused on your sense of personal usefulness and your daily stress, your daily anxieties, things like this. So you may resist looking at any sort of anxieties around your health, but it would be a really good time to look at those things. There can be some pretty strong revelations around that area. It might be wise not to overlook certain symptoms and things like that. You may not have perfect clarity on that quite yet by looking at this, but especially as Mercury goes direct, there should be some greater clarity around health stuff and around matters of daily stress and around concerns about whether or not you feel like day in, day out that your routine is helping you to be effective and productive and constructive in your life, right? Also, keeping in mind that it is not possible to control your workplace dynamics completely if you work with other people. So you may be kind of extra frustrated or be a bit triggered, especially around this time, with regard to how your working life is being experienced due to things that are going on in the environment. So colleagues and the effort that they are putting in or the attitudes that they are bringing may be a big thing. Keeping in mind that we can't control this, especially not in a heavy-handed way, and accepting that you can't control it can help to release some of that internal emotional, psychological, physical resistance that we feel to those things as well. To just be like, you know what? I'm just going to stay in my lane. It's not really any of my business. I can't control it. I'm just going to focus on my tasks at hand. It can make even very annoying things that we have going on around us easier to deal with. To just be like, you know what? There's not really much point in focusing too heavily on trying to improve that, right? So accepting that, allowing you to basically move forward with a lighter, more emotionally sustainable kind of daily routine, right? Daily working life, by not internally feeling like a strong desire to control maybe an annoying coworker habit or something like this, you know? So also really important then to stay in one's own lane by focusing just on the tasks and the health habits that you can directly influence right now. So your own habits are where the focus should flow as much as possible around this period of time. So productivity coming from focusing on your own tasks, organizing your own self, and not so much in trying to overly direct the actions and attitudes and habits of others around. I hate to say that, but I feel like that's going to come through as pretty distinctive and sharp during this period of time. So yeah, focusing on being productive, that's something that you can definitely do, Gemini. So yeah, I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. Okay, so for Cancer, we have the new moon in Scorpio in your 5th house. And so this is speaking to matters of creativity, of self-expression, of your children, of your joy, your pleasure. And so this is speaking to a need to really release any sort of inhibitions that you may have in this area of creativity or joy. So releasing where it is that you may hold yourself back out of a fear of rejection or a fear of judgment or something like this from outside of yourself about the expression of your joy, about maybe your childlike nature, about what you love, what you genuinely enjoy engaging in. So for instance, if you have been participating in like a hobby or a creative project or some sort of group dynamic or something like that with friends, and yet you don't quite enjoy it as much, and you may need to kind of take a step back around this period of time if you are not really enjoying that anymore. But also on the other side of that, I could see you kicking something off as well. So kicking off a creative project or kicking off a new connection or a new friendship where you're able to be a lot more authentic, a lot more expressive, a lot more honest about who you are. And this could even be a romantic relationship that is just very like pleasurable and enjoyable as well. So releasing any sort of attachments as to like how your inner child or how your enjoyment should be received by others, and rather just leaning into a sense of real honesty and authenticity when it comes to your joy and your pleasures and what you enjoy as well. If this means kind of having to go your own way, if there are not people around you who are interested in something that you are wanting to really dig into and get into quite a bit, then you may need to do this on your own for a bit. And that should also be quite okay. But, I wouldn't be surprised if there is something that you're kicking off now, which will wind up bringing you into a community around it as well, because of that opposition to Uranus in your 11th house. there can be a bit of a double edge to that, where Uranus in the 11th, certainly from my experience of it, and I've definitely heard about this with other people, is that it can bring you through some really unique groups of people that you are like spending time with and being influenced by and so on and so forth, and then releasing them at different periods of time, because Uranus can bring that in. But it can also bring in new groups as well, like novelty out in that social sphere. Whereas the fifth house has to do with your own authentic self-expression and who you truly are. And so there may be a bit of a release plus addition, but it might not all happen at once here. So you may be taking a step back again from like a group dynamic or a project or something, like a hobby, an activity, a league or whatever, that you've been doing with some other people. And you may be going your own way, but what you might not quite know yet is that you're planting some seeds that are going to wind up bringing you into a different group a little bit down the road as well, which could be pretty fascinating, but I wouldn't be surprised to see that play out in that way too. But yeah, for some reason, I think the Mercury retrograde is not letting me remember. If I didn't fully mention and go into inhibitions and worry about rejection, if you are your authentic self, that I think is going to be a huge aspect of this, in a new moon in Scorpio with that Mercury Cazimi, opposite to that Uranus out in Taurus and the 11th house, like the shocks and upsets of convention and conventional thinking and what will people think, right? There's a real call here with this new moon to release that and to not worry about that and to just be truly honest with yourself about who you are and to step fully into that. So you may have a really significant insight as well about your children, about a friend or a romantic partner, a date or something, or any sort of like personal passion project as well around this period of time. So a real breakthrough along all of those lines. So I would say just be as flexible as you can and allow for your creative process certainly to be reworked. Open yourself up to insights and intuition and instincts with regard to your friends around you as well, but also your children, and be super open to any sort of conversations that they are bringing to the table. Certainly consider sparking some conversations with them as well, if that feels at all right. And additionally, pay attention to the intuitive hits that you're getting, your instinctive responses and what you feel, without obviously gaslighting your children or anything like that. But what do you think is going on with them? There may be something quite significant there. And there may be even like an insight that they are able to bring to you as well. So just kind of keeping those channels of communication very much open with your children as well. The emotional processing aspect of this is going to be really speaking very directly to your desires, like your true heart's desires here. And even, again, potential personal vulnerabilities around self-expression and who you truly are. So this is a very like heart-centered kind of an area as well in the fifth house. And you may resist this in a kind of knee-jerk fashion by building up walls or by like guarding your heart or guarding your expression. But the support is definitely there for you, at least on a spiritual level, but I wouldn't be surprised if on a more public level as well, with friends at least, to be able to feel your true heart's desires very deeply and to accept and embrace what that is as well. Again, even if it doesn't fit in with the social conventions around you as well, obviously within reason, One of the most important things is also keeping in mind here about only controlling the controllables. So no desires about controlling other people or anything like that. Yeah, also again, on that topic, keeping in mind that you can't control like the affections of others or the success of a creative effort. You can just kind of put your creativity out there. You can just infuse your energy into something with your heart open and wish for the best, basically. And if another doesn't return affections, or like if someone else is just not into the same kinds of things as you are, you can't force them to be into something, it's kind of like with TV shows or with music or something like that. If someone else is just not digging it, like you can't make them. is, kind of, I guess, a superficial level aspect of this, but I think hopefully a little bit instructive on this. So releasing the control over those things is going to help to offer you a sense of greater connection with like authentic pleasure and joy, doing things just for the pleasure of it. That's one thing that's really important with the fifth house, is it's just for pleasure. This isn't financially focused. This isn't about fitting in. It's not about status. It's just about joy and openness to what you really like, right? And then, yeah, finally, staying in your own lane, channeling your own creative energy into your own personal hobbies, really spending quality time with yourself and your hobbies and your interests, be it really great books or be it, digging into esoteric topics, maybe like divination or intuition or some artistic medium as well, something around a topic that you're intellectually stimulated by quite a bit, personal improvement, things like this. Work productively on what you really find fun and not on seeking external validation around this period of time. And if you're able to do that, I think that that is a seed that you can plant around this period of time that you can really run with, because it's speaking so directly to the opposition to Uranus in your 11th house, which is fundamentally shifting and changing the way that you relate with society, generally speaking. And there can be, with Taurus there, a desire to kind of stay within a certain box or stay within certain conventions that are considered like acceptable, to want to be seen as harmonious with things and flowing with things and not rocking the boat too much. And there is a desire for that sense of security, knowing your place, within social circles or whatever. But this is rocking that in such a way to where you can embrace your own joys and your own creativity, your own pleasures, your own connections that you really enjoy, while embracing that if you do that, then that in and of itself, that attitude is going to bring you into the kinds of circles, the kind of tribe, right, that will genuinely support you for who you are and that you can genuinely grow with. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Cancer. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Leo, we have the new moon in Scorpio in your 4th house. And this is the house of home and family and your origins, your core of who you are, where you come from. And so this is going to be speaking quite directly to a really powerful release of a family pattern, potentially a living situation or an emotional foundation that's occurring throughout this period of time. So this could be bringing up family dynamics. This could be bringing up secrets from family as well. Some big insights on the power dynamics potentially in families or the emotional dynamics that may be less than ideal or less than desirable. It can also be really speaking to and bringing to mind for you issues around what your desired family life looks like, and possibly some of the shortcomings of what you're actually experiencing along those lines. So there's a lot of support with this alignment to let go of, to release what is rooted in the past, to release those old patterns. Maybe this is a season where you will be approaching family from a much more authentic place, and to not feel the need to stay within the boxes or the confines or the conventions that have been kind of laid out for you, the boxes that other people maybe put you in family dynamics where you're just kind of expected to deal with it. This would be encouraging you to be very honest as well with yourself about even like how you participate in some of those dynamics, but especially around who you truly are. And if there's any conditioning or issues, like negative stuff, right, from family, any negative family patterns or rejection or like the black sheep kind of thing that goes on within your family, whether it be around you or around someone else, I feel like you're kind of not really having that so much this time around, and should be hopefully being able to look at that really honestly for what it is, to embrace your responsibility for cleaning up your experience of that, regardless of whether other people are willing to do the lifting, whether other people are willing to make amends for maybe their part in it or anything like that. This is about you clearing up and purifying and purging any of the remnants and any of the residues of that in your own self, and then approaching those dynamics very differently. So breaking that pattern, basically. So there could be a really crucial conversation or memory that winds up arising or resurfacing from your family or from your private life that's coming up essentially for review. So there could be a conversation about something that happened in the past, or about you may be confronted with like a memory about something that happened in the past. I would recommend trying not to get too fixated on that, because that Mercury retrograde in Scorpio could get stuck in a loop on something. And I know that that's something we can do when we're ruminating on something, generally speaking. So I would say try not to get on a loop with that, but look at it as honestly as you can, and then focus on the purification, the purging, the releasing aspect of that. You know, take what's useful of it with you forward. Try to release yourself from it. Try to address the hold that whatever that is might have on you. So maybe there's an issue that's been being swept under the rug for a while, but you know it's there. Maybe another party knows it's there, and you're just not dealing with it because you know it's going to be complicated, and you know it's going to be emotional, and so on and so forth. And this may wind up causing that to resurface just generally anyway, right? So being as open as you can to a new perspective on those family dynamics, on notions of what home means to you, rather than holding on to the old story or being too rigid about your memory of a situation, or your subjective view of a situation, or someone else's subjective view of a situation. So again, this is pushing honesty a lot. And the more that we can lean into that aspect of it and release anything else, I think that the better. You know, when I was talking in the collective, I was speaking about the significance of the detached perspective that on one level, this new moon is going to be offering, because it's conjunct to the lunar apogee. And I think that that could be also really helpful here, is really trying to take a detached view on family patterns and dynamics and things like that, because it can be really difficult for us to be rational and detached when it comes to those things, because it's so fundamentally personal. So if we can, as much as we can, not take things personally and not personalize, for instance, the psychological or emotional dynamics of your family members, and not take personally the karmic past, the karmic history, the karmic patterning of your ancestry, and so on and so forth, and just be honest about it and try to address it through that purging, through that releasing process. I think that's going to be as helpful as possible, right? So trying not to hold on to that old story as well. Also, the emotional processing here is quite profound, and it's speaking about, again, your roots, your family, your innermost kind of private self as well. Again, the resistance around that emotional processing is probably around trying to be strong, or trying to be like foundationally, right? Like being a rock for people. Nothing can bother me. I'm tough. I can deal with it, right? I can suck it up. But the real growth potential here is through honoring your vulnerability. If you can only do that in private, if you do not have any chance of there being healthy family dynamics, and you know that it's not great, for instance, if you're doing something around the holidays, right, and you're dealing with family, and you know that being radically honest with them is not going to accomplish anything, right? Just not taking that personally can be super liberating, right? And allowing then for you for yourself to go then on your own and process those emotions and recognize that you've taken something on and that it needs to be released, right? So even if you are still on the surface sucking it up and dealing with whatever and blah, 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 allowing for yourself in private to be kind of vulnerable and to not hold tight to that boundary, that guardrail that you have around yourself, when you're dealing with the unhealthy dynamics, try to let that down with yourself when you get into private. Keeping in mind, again, what we cannot control. For you, that's going to be pretty significant around your family's actions or behaviors or attitudes, the things that they say, the things that they believe, the things that they feel, their values, their healing, things like this. You cannot force that and you cannot control that, unfortunately. So accepting that is going to do a world of help for you to not be then emotionally attached to something that is inherently kind of frustrating and impossible, right? To change someone else. So accepting that is going to allow you basically to move forward with a lighter emotional foundation, as well as a kind of clearer, more honest vision of your own family, your past, your childhood, your home dynamics, your living situation, how things hit you internally, emotionally, etc. Very important then to stay in one's own lane by focusing on your own inner world, your own private space, and making sure that that is clear, cleansed, purified, purged. Not so much anything that is unaffected by that. If you have an open family that is emotionally supportive, and if when you are addressing these things with them, they can recognize that and participate, that's awesome. I would say that that's the area to purify and purge and be really honest and open the lines of communication and things like that. But if you can't, then it's just really staying in your own space, your own inner world, making sure that is clear and cleansed and private and safe for you to let your walls down then when you're in that place. And the kind of productive aspect of this, maybe decluttering your home, clearing, cleansing the energies in your home, smudging, things like that would be really great. Journaling and establishing as well like healthier emotional boundaries with your family and with the people that you live with. So even if this means that the walls that you put up at times need to be literal, like you need to have a room that you can go in and literally just not deal with people for a little bit, like if you have children or a partner, that is just kind of like generally needing your attention and taking a lot of your attention, and you feel like you don't have that kind of do not disturb, status energy at times, even within your own home. Creating that for yourself, I think would be really cool with this energy as well. And it would be quite conducive to that. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Leo. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right. So for Virgo, we have the new moon in Scorpio taking place in your third house. And this is the house of your mind, of your communication, of your connections with those around you, the people, places, things around you, your community, as well as peers and siblings and so on. So there may be a pretty strong release that is needed regarding a specific kind of a mindset that you're carrying. So if there are any like self-limiting beliefs, if there is any sort of worry around being alienated within your community or not being accepted, being seen as a black sheep, or something like this, it would be really great to address those kinds of mindsets through a sense of purging, purifying, releasing around that. There may also be a specific like local community tie or a peer or an acquaintance or someone around as well on a kind of daily basis that you may need to step back from as well if they are a kind of negative influence or if they have a tendency to speak kind of roughly or to be kind of unforgiving, things like this. Even if there's a specific kind of communication style that's beyond just like one person, but maybe people are really focused on the negative recently or something like this. And you may feel the need to pull back from people who are doing that and who are maybe kind of freaking you out a little bit, or causing you to feel like there's something negative or seedy about your environment or your community or your country or something like this. So letting go, releasing the need to like dissect and control all details or be on alert, to be in that kind of fight or flight mindset in any of those ways. Regardless, again, if it's something that is encouraged by those around you, which can be the case in the third house, or if it's something that is kind of spontaneously arising within you, this does give you a really great opportunity to release around that and to not control, again, all of the details and feel the need to dissect or understand every single aspect of everything that could possibly go wrong, right? Especially. So we can't control what others say, what others think, how information, is processed and experienced, how people interpret things or anything like that. We can't control other people's opinions or ideas or things like that. So really releasing that is going to allow you to move forward with a sense of a clearer mind, because you're not bogged down in other people's thoughts or what is the community thinking about this, or what is my brother thinking about this, or so on. But rather than being able to have thoughts that are much more independent and possibly much more rooted in a realistic kind of a framework rather than a fear-based framework or nervousness or anything like that. And also to have more impactful communication, because you may be communicating then, if you're able to purge some of that and release some of that, you should be able to then communicate in a way that's much more honest and forthright and kind of authentic, basically, in a way as well. And also not then needing to fear as much, how is someone going to take this, right? How is this going to be interpreted? So additionally, there's going to be a lot of emotional processing here that's going to be focused quite a bit on your thoughts, your worries, your immediate environment. So you may, by releasing this, also need to address to some extent, maybe there have been aspects of that kind of mindset which has held you back for some time. And so you might be kind of reflecting on that as well, and some of the frustrations around maybe having got caught up on something, having got caught up on either a negative pattern of thought, ruminating, fixating, kind of obsessive thinking or something like this that could have been going on for a little while, and maybe a little frustration around that, and processing basically emotionally where that may come from. Again, if this is an influence that people have had on you for some time, it may require looking back a bit at when did that start, right? And maybe there's a specific person that has really inculcated that or cultivated that in you. Maybe it was a specific dynamic where you didn't know if something you were going to say was going to set someone off or something. And so that can cause you to like overanalyze your own thoughts and overanalyze your own speech, and to do so in kind of a guarded way. If that's the case, there may be a need to really process that emotionally and try to be sensitive with yourself about that. There's a lot of support with this alignment for feeling the emotions that are beneath the thoughts and looking at them really honestly for what they are and where they come from. Now, there may also be a really significant revelation or like a piece of information or a message or communication or conversation or something like that with a sibling or a neighbor, community member, a peer, someone like this, that has a really strong impact on you and your thinking as well. So there may be an old message that you wind up coming across. Again, there may be some kind of revelation around some of these people. Again, maybe in part some of the influence that they have on you. Maybe there is some gossip going around. Probably best not to participate very much with that. But do try to be flexible and rethink your position on these different things and allow for that information to come in and reveal itself to you, rather than kind of digging in your heels and saying, no, I know what the situation is and I'm not. For instance, like maybe you've always erred on the side of one person that has some drama with someone else, if there's a revelation around, maybe if you even recognize like, hey, why do you keep participating in that drama if you really don't want it, kind of a thing, Try not to block out those kinds of thoughts, because they can have a really strong impact then on avoiding some complications that you could otherwise kind of wind up dealing with, right? I hope that makes sense. But yeah, just basically staying like focusing on your own lane, your own mindset, kind of minding your own business a bit throughout this period of time, I think is going to be good, because it will be a bit of a minefield around you in terms of revelations, people saying things that might be weirdly negative, right? People planting seeds of doubt, maybe even fear. I hate to say that. There's probably going to be people who are just really honest in the environment, but it's going to be a bit more of watch where you step kind of a situation, for lack of a better way of putting that. But yeah, productive work involving like revising your own organization of your kind of personal schedule, your daily life, maybe how it is that you communicate with certain people. Maybe this is getting on top of your like correspondence, dealing with any sort of emails that have been piling up, or getting back to writing or journaling your feelings. Things like that can be really revealing and can help you to really learn a lot about yourself and how you relate to other people as well. But yeah, I think that that's a lot of what I have for you, Virgo. So I do hope that that helps, and I hope this new moon treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Libra rising, we have the new moon in Scorpio taking place in your second house. And this house has to do with your own personal resources. So this can speak to your finances, your earnings, your possessions. This can also speak to your values and what it is that you value as well. And so this is speaking to a need to release some sort of attachments around matters of income or values or some sense of self-worth, and really purge and purify that. So coming back to a sense of not just earning for the sake of it, not just saving for the sake of it, but looking at where, on a financial level, we'll deal with this first, why, focusing on your why, and purifying kind of your relationship with that financial aspect. So again, rather than focusing on the like kind of less than human numbers aspect of your finances, looking at it from a perspective of what does this offer me? How does this impact my quality of life? And trying to reframe it again, pull it back to that kind of perspective of this is why I do what I do. So also then from a perspective of values, looking at those, reconnecting with those, kind of trying to purify and purge those. What is it that you truly value when it comes to matters of your convictions, but also when it comes to your matter of what's important to you in life, in your life, on a personal level, right? So what do you really value? What do you really want to feel connected with? What do you want to invest your time and your effort and your energy into? Only you can really answer that for yourself. And so this is going to be a period of time where you're able to purify and purge other people's expectations, or trying to seek the affirmation or assurance, or trying to fit into the expectations of what other people think that you should value, or what other people think that you should be invested in, things like this. And that is going to help to really shore up a sense of rooting your own self-worth deeply in yourself, and releasing any sort of attachments then to financial outcomes or to possessions as something that like defines your value. That's not what defines your value. That's just what enables you to have the kind of quality of life that you're wanting and to seek to build upon that, right? This is ultimately always based on the joy of living, the quality genuinely of your life, and the value that you place upon your enjoyment of your life and your enjoyment of your own resources, right? So this is bringing you back to that kind of perspective of reevaluating those things, not status, quality of your life, right? So you may get some really pivotal insights as well during this period of time around your earnings, around some possessions of yours, maybe around even property can show up here. Assets basically is the way that would be looked at in this house, or again, some kind of core values of yours. So getting some really strong insights about that. You may get some communication around earnings. For instance, if you're due for a raise or something like this, you could get some communications around that, some greater clarity around that. You may get some greater clarity, for instance, if you work for a company, about the financial standing of the company as well and what those plans are going forward. But again, when it comes to your possessions or investments or assets or property, you may be getting a valuation around that or a reevaluation around that. That's also giving you some insight there. Now, if there is an evaluation or a valuation that takes place around this time and it seems off and you want to get it re-looked at, I would say that that would be wise, just because this Mercury is retrograde. So there might be something a little bit funky about a valuation of a property in terms of value, right? That's what that would be. So being flexible then also with financial plans and not being too rigid in your decision making around finances and things like that as well, and around investments and things like that. So this may be a really good time to look at your budgets, to try to plan that out lightly. Again, focusing on quality of life, focusing on what truly matters to you, rather than just focusing on what are the numbers, right? So bringing this back to a kind of human perspective about what even the value of resources are. So in terms of the emotional processing here, this is going to be relatively deep and about matters of your security. And again, coming back to a sense of what you truly value, what you truly desire to create for yourself in terms of your resources. And the knee-jerk reaction here may be to seek a sense of security externally, but this is ultimately about creating, purifying that sense of security, seeding that deeply in yourself and your sense of self-assuredness that you have the resources that you need and that you can create the resources that you may need as well. Additionally, releasing control over, for instance, markets or the business decisions of people that you are involved with, the financial decisions of people that you are involved with. Maybe you are wanting to disassociate your own resources with those of others around this period of time. But beyond that, it's like all that we can control when it comes to our resources is what we choose to do with them and whether we choose to leave some of that on the table. If there are resources that we can tap into, that would be great if you wanted to do that. This may even bring some insights to mind about ways that you could do that, to tap into some resources that you kind of have on the table here. But additionally, or how you could monetize some resources that you have, like a talent or a skill or something like that. You may get some insights on that. But additionally, if the resources are simply what they are, then a frustration about what they are, a lot of people would say in terms of manifestation, that's not the greatest attitude to have. And I know that that is complicated when legitimately, like, the resources just feel like they're not enough. They will be what they are, regardless of how you feel about that. So best to try and just control what are you doing with those resources, right? And trying to make the best of that situation. And additionally, focusing on your worth as tied to possessions, that doesn't give you control over yourself. So we want to try to focus on staying in your own lane by understanding and defining your own sense of worth and value, and the value and worth of your life and the quality of your life. You're wanting to seed that purely in yourself here. So accepting all of that can help bring a lot of clarity, again, around what truly makes you feel valuable and possibly even more so secure. So again, kind of staying in our own lane by focusing solely on the kind of personal budget and resources, working productively on assessing your skills, as well as what it is that you can build for yourself through the resources that you have and that you wind up bringing to the table as well. But yeah, I think that is a lot of what I have for you, Libra. So I hope that this new moon treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right. So for Scorpio rising, we of course have the new moon in Scorpio in your first house. So this is going to be very fundamentally personal for you and about how you relate to others as well. So this is the house of yourself, of your identity, of how you approach things, of how you see yourself, how other people see you, etc. It is your role, the role that you play basically. And so this can present a really profound opportunity to release an old identity, an old self image, or a way of presenting yourself to the world during this period of time. So you may be going really quite deep internally to realign yourself basically with your joys, with your desires, with your pleasures, with the way that you are desiring to grow and expand yourself in the world and expand your sense of like the contribution that you're wanting to make or the connections that you're wanting to have, going a bit wider with that throughout this period of time. And yet, in order to precipitate that with this energy here around this new moon and that Mercury retrograde Cazimi in your first house there, really looking fundamentally at your own needs, your own desires, your own sense of purpose and identity and meaning of your life, right? Your motivations and how your mind and your thinking process and how it is that you like convey yourself to the world is either helpful or hindering to that. And this may be something that you've kind of fallen out of touch with a little bit. We all do at times where we're just kind of on autopilot trying to get things done. And we're not like looking at ourselves in this kind of profound, deeply self-analyzing kind of a way. And I wouldn't even say that this has to be just pure analysis that you're approaching this from, but rather like feeling into who am I truly at my core? What do I truly like? And who do I truly want to be? And how do I get myself there? And also, how do I communicate with the world in a way such that I'm able to convey that and be able to live that life basically more easily? So this is a really powerful rebirth of the you basically that you are showing to the world, that you are interacting with the world with, right? So this is likely to provide a lot of really crucial insights about yourself. This could also be your health or your body or your personal goals. Again, the role that you're wanting to play as well, kind of aspirationally, the seeds that you're wanting to sow with regard to your role and your image and identity, and especially your self-image. Because the way that we see ourselves has such a huge impact on the way that we wind up experiencing life and the opportunities that wind up being available to us, just whether we're bringing like an open energy to those that we're approaching or kind of a shut down, worried about how people are taking us kind of an energy, right? So this is allowing you to tap pretty directly into that and to get some real insights about the impact of that as well. So be really open throughout this period of time to redefining who you are, and definitely avoid clinging to any sort of outdated self-perception. And especially if you see anything cropping up around negative self-talk or around those little weird feelings about being weird or being unusual or not being accepted or being, an outsider, these kinds of labels that they may help us sometimes to embrace in those kind of critical moments. But when we are relaxing into those kinds of identities as a given, it can kind of shut us down to certain connections and certain new ways of growing and things like that. So as flexible as you can be, and as much as you can look at those kinds of thoughts as they crop up, and just if you want to look at like what is the root of that, where is that coming from? Is there some kind of conditioning, or is there some kind of social influence which has encouraged that kind of thinking or anything like that? That can be helpful, but just not clinging to those, I think, is going to be pretty significant and important here. Yeah, in terms of emotional processing, that's really going to be centered on you and how you perceive of yourself and how you feel like you are perceived by others. So you may resist that kind of deep dive into who you are at your core, But this alignment is really exceptionally well supported for a really profound personal transformation. Again, not just in how you see yourself, but then how you approach others because of that opposition to Uranus out in your seventh house being a kind of revolution or an innovation in how it is that you engage with relationship patterns and relationship dynamics and things like that as well, and liberating you from living by the standards of other people. It's important that obviously our connections with others are built upon mutual respect, and clearly we should take it seriously if we're stepping on toes all the time and so on and so forth. But if we are taking for ourselves what other people are defining as acceptable or what we should desire or how we should behave or whatever, and this is very much not in alignment with ourselves, then we can start to really just kind of shut down. So try not to resist that because this is, as I said in the intro and in the collective and everything, this is a type of an alignment that we're not going to get again. So this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to really dig deep into this first house, fifth house, ninth house thing of yours that's kind of long term, which is about you, yourself, your growth, your creativity, your self-expression, what you truly enjoy, what you truly want, what you truly align with, etc. And then how you may need to change your relational style to help support that as well, with the opposition to Uranus out in the seventh, not to mention Pluto is in your fourth house right now, and that is also supporting a really deep personal, fundamental transformation, again, especially around any sort of conditioning or the expectations that have been placed upon you from outside. So it'll be pretty important to recognize, of course, you can't control how others will perceive of this change that you're going through, of your transformation. Some people will probably accept it. Some people may be a little bit weird about any sort of changes that you're making during this period of time, but that is very much a them problem, you know. So releasing that concern with how your personal transformations are perceived, especially as someone with Scorpio in your chart, that's important. It's going to allow you to move forward much more lightly, much more authentically, and with a much more kind of powerful vision of who it is that you are and your role and what you're capable of, basically. So focus on very much during this period of time, staying in your own lane and turn a lot of this energy truly inward. It's not about what other people are doing and their concerns around this time for you. This is really about you redefining yourself to make sure that you are fully in alignment with your own desired growth, right? So the most productive work here is really on yourself, realigning with your intentions, realigning with your personal goals, and realigning with your own sense of personal well-being, be it physical, emotional, spiritual, you know, basically across the board here. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Scorpio. Very, very powerful alignment. I would definitely recommend leaning into it. You may want to take a little bit of time out for yourself and just kind of relax into this energy around the evening of the 19th into the 20th, etc. Maybe even take some more time than that to go full in on the emotional processing here, because it is a very fascinating alignment that I think you can really get a lot out of. But yeah, I hope that this new moon treats you super well, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Sagittarius, we have the new moon in Scorpio taking place in your 12th house. So there is a very deep subconscious release that's coming through here. The 12th house is the place of the subconscious. It's a place of things that are a bit beyond our control. It is this place where we need to face in our own resistance to things. It can be a place of isolation and solitude. And so this new moon in Scorpio is likely to be working on your subconscious quite a bit. So when it comes to any sort of conditioning patterns and difficulties along those lines, looking at where your subconscious thinking is basically is coming from. So looking at the root of that, looking at the causes of that, looking at any sort of karmic patterns or hidden fears, or what is going on kind of behind the scenes of your life or your connections, the things that you try to sweep under the rug may be really rearing their heads around this period of time. And so releasing as much as you can along those lines is going to be, of course, way easier said than done. It's difficult to know exactly what it is that we're dealing with when we're dealing with the 12th house, because it is so unknown there. But there should be some insights that are kind of coming through your psyche that should be providing some awareness about some subconscious undercurrents, which may be having a strong impact on your energy, or the way that you're approaching things, or your level of optimism and your expectation, and all of these things that, like, conditioning basically can wind up having a really strong impact on. So surrendering those things as much as you possibly can, those hidden fears that seem to crop up out of nowhere, and then maybe you brush them aside. Any sort of karmic patterns, so patterns of how you relate to others, patterns of maybe even self-sabotage can be a thing that comes up with the 12th house. So do you start to hold yourself back when you're getting to a point that you haven't quite experienced yet? So for instance, maybe this is a like fear of success is one of the ways that can wind up playing out. And then kind of throwing up like some negative thoughts to throw yourself off of a specific track so that you don't have to push yourself outside of a comfort zone or something like that, right? So surrendering those things as much as you possibly can. And you're likely also to get a significant amount of insight from your dreams, or through meditation, or through spending time in solitude, where your subconscious mind is able to really emerge much more into the conscious. So being as kind of flexible as you can with those messages that wind up coming through, I would definitely recommend writing down, or like dream journaling basically, and connecting with any sort of guidance that you get from there, communicating with your guides if that is something that you are at all open to. When it comes to your like spiritual connections, also being flexible with those and how they are coming through. It's likely that all of that is bringing in different insights. But of course, when it comes to those spiritual connections and things like that, that can happen in some weird kinds of ways, right? It doesn't always come through the way that we would expect it to, but it always comes through the way that it is best suited to, right? So this isn't a period of time where logic is going to reign. This is really about focusing on your feelings, and perhaps especially your instinctive reactions of feeling toward any given thing. So if something is hitting you weird, looking at that and trying to figure out where's that coming from, I think is going to be really, really helpful as well. When it comes to the emotional processing here, that is happening on a pretty profound, like, soul level. Again, bringing things up to the surface to be healed. This emotional processing is a big part of this whole new moon for you. That's a fundamental part of it. So you may have some level of resistance to that by trying to escape it, or trying to lean into escapism, or dissociation, or distractions, or things like that. But there's a lot of support with this alignment to really sit in the stillness and get a lot out of it. Get a lot of personal insights out of it that are not usually available. Like, this is a weird alignment to be able to tap into. And so I would really recommend doing so, because that, for instance, that Mercury in Scorpio, Cazimi, during a new moon, that is definitely enough to bring that subconscious stuff into the conscious mind. And that is a notoriously difficult thing to do. So there's a really wonderful opportunity there. Also, keeping in mind that you can't necessarily control what is unseen, or how things will ultimately wind up playing out, which is usually one of these fears that can come in, creeping in from the subconscious, like, oh, how is this ultimately going to wind up playing out, or whatever. Accepting that we can't control what we can't control, and that we can't control the whole way that, like, a story is going to play out, I think is going to be really helpful here. And accepting that is going to allow you to kind of move forward with a sense of a lighter spirit, as well as clearer intuition, because you're not then tensing up as much at the honest guidance that you're receiving, right? So going to be kind of important as well to stay in your own lane in terms of leaning into some solitude here, leaning into some of the healthier habits of like meditation and things like that, rather than maybe substances. This can be really restorative for you. So focusing in on that and not at all what's going on so much with other people. There's so much energy here in your houses of your own private life. So you've got the sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, you have Saturn, Jupiter, Neptune, you have the North Node. All of this is in this triad of the private life, right? So this is really calling for extra emphasis on clearing yourself out emotionally and releasing emotional attachments, especially around how things have gone in the past, and not bringing that kind of expectation into the future, as well as fears around outcomes and things like that as well. So productive work here is going to involve, of course, solitude, possibly even meditation if that's something that you are at all interested in, journaling, dream analysis, and also releasing compassionately what is not yours to carry. And one of the ways that we can 12th house dissociate from our own problems and our own subconscious is by trying to help other people with their own problems. So ignoring our own problems by dealing with those of others, and kind of painting this as a selfless act, which is great. It's always great to help people. But if we're doing so in order to not deal with our own stuff, or if we're doing so in a self-sacrificial way, which is kind of self-sabotaging as well, if someone else is not holding their own, and if someone else is not fixable, but we keep trying to put energy into trying to help to fix them, then that is a kind of waste of resources, unfortunately. And we can release that compassionately, knowing that it's not our responsibility. But hey, if you want to genuinely work on yourself, and if you genuinely want to fix your situation, this person that you're connecting with or whatever, then you can feel free to come to me. But I can't keep trying to do all of the work for you, kind of a thing as well. But yeah, I think that that's a lot of the different ways that this new moon might be coming through for you, Sagittarius. So I do hope that it treats you very well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Capricorn, we have the new moon in Scorpio in your 11th house. And this is speaking of matters regarding friendship and group dynamics, colleagues, benefactors, people who are generally pretty much on your side, as well as hopes, dreams, aspirations, goals, things like this. And so this is going to speak to some kind of a release around a dynamic with regard to this area of your life. So the way that you do friendships and group affiliations, there could be something that feels too attached, right? So it may seem like you're needing to step into a different kind of an energy or a different group, even specifically. So this could be stepping from one dynamic into another. But there could also be some internal, very understandable control issues around how you're seen, how you're perceived, the role that you play within group dynamics. So if that has felt too heavy, or if it has felt like you're needing to try to kind of white knuckle control that a bit, or if you have been feeling like you are needing to like take care of the considerations, the concerns of others, that you've been needing to step in, that you've been needing to take on a leadership role, and yet you feel like maybe that is pulling some of your own energy that you could be using for yourself away from you as well, then this would be speaking to that kind of need to release some of the attachment there. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to like cut all your friends out of your life or anything like that. Not at all. It's just about understanding the boundaries there, basically, and understanding that we can't always control the kind of people that are available to us, or the people that are available to us, what's going on with them internally, right? So, and that can have an impact on us, certainly. And you may need to kind of think that through of what is the energy that I'm dealing with when I'm dealing with the friends, basically, the colleagues that are around me. Are they a bit negative, or are they a bit maybe self-serving, or are they a bit fearful? You know, what's going on with them? You don't always need to take on that energy of theirs. So there's something there about the way that the energy is flowing in that area, which is calling for some kind of major release there, especially when it comes to specific social outcomes, right? So long-term hopes and goals for your future as well, those may be undergoing a shift. You're rethinking those already because the fact that you have that Mercury retrograde there. The Uranus in your 5th house is bringing up matters of self-expression and joy and pleasure and what you really want on a kind of deep and fundamental level. And that Mercury is looking at that and trying to ascertain, okay, how am I going to adjust my goals and my aspirations and my hopes in order to accommodate for these kind of internal changes as well around your own alignment with pleasures and joys and things like that. So it may be that you are going through a kind of final shift with regard to some hobbies or interests, the energies, again, that you enjoy dealing with. This could even have to do something with your family or your children or something like this as well, and just kind of needing to follow your own lead. So this may center around some conversations or insights about a friend or a role within your community. So there could be some insights that are arising in that area as well. So try to be really open if you can to redefining what friendship and community mean to you. If maybe you've been putting a lot of time and effort and resources into that, but you haven't quite felt the kind of connection that you're looking for, again, there may need to be a bit of a rebalancing there, especially if there are some great people around you that you haven't quite had as much time for, or as many resources for, because you've been kind of feeding them into something else. Also, if you have been trying to push yourself toward your goals and your aspirations, and it's been pulling you away from the enjoyment of social connection and things like this, that could also really be coming up quite a bit. Maybe there's going to be a conversation around that as well. There's also a lot of emotional processing coming up in this area of your life, focused again on those social bonds and aspirations. So again, you may look at this as somehow unproductive or maybe frivolous or like superfluous, and you're just kind of trying to get down to brass tacks and so forth. But it's really helpful to understand what kind of, for one thing, if you want to just look at it in that kind of cut and dry way, what kind of social resources you have, and tapping into that and feeding into that as well. But if you're able to understand what you really connect with and who is really in your corner and what it feels like is really going to be calling to you and aligning with you, that can have really untold benefits. And that is your 11th house. A lot of benefits tend to come through there. So really connecting in very deeply on that level as well. Yeah, again, as far as like controlling your friends' actions or the direction that a group is taking, again, if you've been in a leadership position, but you're kind of feeling unaligned, that can be really difficult when you're trying to lead something and you're not quite sure about the direction of it as well. So releasing that role, basically, as an authority or a leader in this area, letting things shake out for a little bit here, maybe a couple weeks, maybe a month or something, rethinking that and coming back at that, if you decide to, with a more kind of detached, open to the possibilities kind of energy to that, right? That you're bringing to that situation. So releasing that control is going to really help to clarify which alliances truly align with you throughout this period of time as well. And yeah, just kind of focusing on reviewing throughout this period of time your personal hopes and wishes, how that is, again, aligning to your sense of being able to express yourself really authentically as well, working productively on your own goals without comparison to other people, or without trying to figure out, are people going to approve of this? That could be a really big thing here too, is social approval, and needing to release, again, those heavy considerations sometimes of like, are people going to be okay with me doing my own thing here? Are people going to be okay with me taking this direction? Am I still going to be able to have the friend groups or social groups or whatever that I have around me and their approval if I am truly honest about what my long-term goals are and what direction I feel like I'm growing in, right? So that may include a little bit of growing apart from some people. And this isn't a super like extreme thing. That's not something that I'm really picking up on a personal level from this new moon, about like totally having to, door slam people or cut people out of our lives. In some cases, maybe, again, if there's a major energy drain, but I really feel like this is more so about getting in touch with what we're really aligned to and how our lives have been developing, whether we are emotionally satisfied with that, and then redirecting that in a way that feels lighter, that feels like there's more possibility. In your case, probably as like there's more pleasure available to you there. And again, just one last point with that opposition with Uranus in the fifth, there may even be some kind of a realization, either through conversation with others or just internally, around how some inhibitions from childhood, like inner child inhibitions, have impacted the way that you socialize with others, or the expectations that you place upon yourself and others and those kinds of dynamics. And so if that winds up coming through, again, just trying to be as gentle and open with yourself about that as you can. Often I feel like we can kind of catastrophize around those realizations of, oh, wow, okay, now I recognize this. If I now try to improve upon or change how I'm approaching these connections, am I going to have to do a complete clean slate when it comes to my social connections? Is this whole area of life going to have to be wiped clean? And I don't think that it usually does. I think that this is, again, with all the Scorpio stuff that we're dealing with here, much more of an internal kind of a process that we're all going through. So yeah, again, just feel free to really redefine your social role and your aspirations, your hopes and dreams, and don't let the fact that maybe you have decided up until this point to go in one direction to hold you back from any sort of pivots that are coming up for you around this period of time as well. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Capricorn. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right. So for Aquarius rising, we have the new moon in Scorpio in your 10th house. And this is the place of your public image, of your public life, of what it is that you're trying to create of yourself in the world. So your legacy, your reputation. Typically, this winds up showing up as our career path, but feel free, if you don't have a traditional career, to apply it to, again, that kind of public life, right? So this is speaking to a really powerful release that's coming up around your career, around your public reputation, or around your life direction. So you may be deciding to take a kind of pivot toward a greater sense of personal meaning and alignment and emotional fulfillment when it comes to the work that you do, how you earn resources, and especially the direction in which your public life, or I will say your career, is headed, basically. So there's a redefinition that's coming up here around all of that, and possibly a need to release some outdated ambitions that don't quite align anymore. So if there is a professional identity or a professional ambition or something like this that feels kind of outdated, that's getting a little bit weighty, that may feel as well like there's a lot of strings attached, maybe even to other people around that, I wouldn't be shy to really look at that, dig into it, try and see it from different kinds of angles, and allow for yourself to take that kind of a pivot. So there could also be a pivotal kind of insight or conversation with even an authority figure, but with someone regarding your professional direction or your public life direction that you wind up having that can have a really strong impact on the future direction of your life. Pardon, Mercury retrograde is really starting to kick in. And this may also have something to do with your past with that Mercury retrograde. So you may have a conversation with someone that you used to work with, or someone that you used to look up to, or someone who has kind of guided you in your public life before. This could even be a parent as well. And so being flexible with the insights that wind up coming through in those connections, I think is also going to be helpful. Just kind of keep an open mind around that. And also be flexible with the directional kind of shifts and pivots that your career path is taking around this period of time. Try not to kind of rigidly hold on to some single definition of success. This would be a really wonderful time for you to especially recognize if you have a unique origin, say your family life or your early childhood or your background is kind of unique. Maybe there are multiple threads that you've woven together, and your public life, therefore, is a kind of unique path that you've taken. That traditional definition of success can really become a bit of a hindrance, because if your career path, if your public life path, if your success, right, takes a rather non-linear trajectory, then comparing yourself, for instance, to those who do follow that linear trajectory can really have you feeling like you're out of step when you're just on a completely different path, right? So defining and redefining what success truly means to you on a deep level, and especially on an emotional or gut level, I think is going to be really important here too. And there is going to be a lot of emotional processing about all of this as well. So any sort of major attachments that you've had to specific roles, maybe you're even recognizing that you're in a role that you were shooting for, and yet maybe there's not quite as much satisfaction there as you would like. And you're recognizing, okay, I'm going to need to take some kind of different steps here in order to reframe this and redirect this in a way to bring in something else that I kind of hadn't considered. So the kind of knee-jerk resistance to this is going to be to just kind of continue to try and follow that same trajectory of success, because it's something that you can really kind of hold on to. But there's a balancing act here between a kind of emotional detachment so that you can look at things from a perspective which isn't quite so personalized, where there isn't as much ego basically involved, and yet also really tapping into these questions around emotional fulfillment. So I'm trying to kind of lay this out. It's not quite as, I don't think, paradoxical as it sounds, but again, detaching the ego and yet allowing for the emotional flow to define this. So again, it's a balancing act between detachment of emotion and yet feeling into the emotion. So can you kind of look at those emotions for what they are, accept them for what they are, accept the fact that there is a lot of wisdom in that as well, and yet not get so personally attached that you're being a little bit rigid about that direction, right? I hope that that makes sense and that it doesn't sound judgy. I don't mean it in at all a judgy way. But also then keeping in mind that we can't always control the opinions or attitudes of authority figures as well. If you've been kind of struggling with that recently, that's something that can definitely benefit from a level of emotional detachment. That is usually if there's a weird authority figure that you've been dealing with, or you've been noticing a bit of a trying to please people kind of a way that you are approaching authority figures, keeping in mind that usually those things are not personal, right? I think can really help quite a bit. So releasing the control over public opinion or the judgments of others. And again, the definitions of success of others, the paths of others, not comparing yourself to others, releasing all of that is going to bring a lot more clarity around what you truly want to achieve in this life, right? So also just trying to stay in your own lane throughout this period of time by focusing really on your own performance, your own responsibilities, what it is that you really bring to the table. So working productively on looking at what are your professional skills, what is it, again, that you kind of bring to the table, your own personal definition of achievement, as well perhaps as looking at your CV or your resume. If you're feeling a level of questioning around whether you're really satisfied, I do feel like that Mercury retrograde, if you can just do the kind of preparatory steps ahead of time around if you think you might want to do a bit of a pivot in terms of your career path soon, just kind of getting yourself to a point where if you were to make that decision, you would be pretty much ready, I think is going to be even emotionally kind of helpful in the present, beyond just being productively helpful a bit down the road. That Mercury retrograde is going to help you to look back over your professional achievements and things like that and look at them in a different way, and will help you to revise or expand upon or edit, any sort of communication of what your achievements have been as well. But yeah, I think that is a lot of what I have for you, Aquarius. Just, again, try to keep in mind to not let others define what success means to you. I think is going to be one of the most critical things to do with this new moon for you. So yeah, I hope that it treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right. So for Pisces, we have the new moon in Scorpio taking place in your 9th house. And this is the place of your worldview, of the expansion of your horizons. We can see a lot of different expansionary kind of topics in this place. So education, travel, spirituality, religion, things like this, your belief system, basically. So there is a really profound release going on with regard to any sort of stuck feelings or blockages when it comes to your expansion and your growth and your personal sense of alignment with your future growth, what really lights you up, what deeply interests you. So this could be around a belief system. This could be around a plan that you've laid out for yourself that you're kind of trying to follow. This could have to do with travel or education, a legal matter even. And so letting go of any sort of constrictions or restrictions around that area, or an outcome or something like that that you can't completely control, is going to be really helpful. So for instance, we can't control what other people believe. We can't necessarily control how the world is unfolding. But what we can reattune to is what it is that we truly believe. What are our convictions? And how can we set ourselves up so that we feel truly in alignment with a kind of sense of our higher self, right? So that we can make the most progress, so that we can expand as well as we can in our own lane, right? So again, if there has been a restrictive belief system that's been around that maybe you've been trying to kind of fit into, this could be a cultural thing, this could be a political thing, this could be a geopolitical thing, just the state of the world or something like this. This could have to do with, like, again, even people pushing you to have to take sides on certain things. You can have your opinions and so forth without overly attaching to the outcomes that the people of those ideologies are kind of pushing, right? So if there's a lot of doom and gloom, which I think that there kind of is in the world, and it's attached to something that you believe in, but you also have a kind of expansionary or open spiritual belief system about believing that things are going to work out, and therefore you should focus on expansion and not maybe so much worry and things like that. So what is it that feels like a glass ceiling or something that's kind of holding you in, right? looking at that and trying to revise that, trying to release that, I think is going to be really helpful. And yeah, if there are any like plans or restrictions or things getting kind of caught up or delayed or feeling a little bit weird, or maybe you're unsure about travel plans or where you're wanting to go, or if you are considering like an educational path or something like this, or you've been considering publishing, or even if there is a legal consideration going on in your life and you're not sure what the outcome is going to be, trying not to let that, any sort of fears around that, right, hold you back from one, living your day-to-day life, two, continuing with a sense of like personal development and growth and hope and optimism that things are going to go well, and also like making the plans that you're wanting with regard to your own personal expansion. Try not to hold yourself back, basically. And there could be some really significant insights that are coming up along those lines as well. And maybe this is something that you've dealt with quite a bit, is just like fear of overexpansion or overextension or over optimism or something like this, and trying to continually check yourself with regard to that. You know, maybe you're looking back on some past experiences where you've kind of held yourself back from truly enjoying something that should have been really quite wonderful. So like a past trip or a previous experience of like an educational pursuit or something like this, and looking back over that. I know that, you know, for instance, a lot of kids, when they go to college, when they're in high school, they can have experiences where it's a little bit more complicated, in part because they don't fully understand the world. And so they're kind of living within other people's rules and like the way things are done. But for a lot of us, like the way that things are done, that's not quite the way that things work for us. And so we can internalize ideas about our own limitations, maybe even the limitations of our minds and what we're capable of. And yet it was just the framework that didn't fit for us. So there may be something that's coming up around that, you know. So trying to be really open to having your mind changed and your perspective expanded with regard to the world, possibilities, optimism, but also your ability. I think that's going to be really important. There's also going to be a lot of emotional processing around your belief systems, and especially, again, any sort of self-limiting beliefs that you've carried. So around your faith as well, your worldview, around a search for meaning. There's a lot of processing of old stuff, old beliefs, old attachments, old worldviews, old worries and things like that. And again, maybe a belief system that you have attached to in the past. Maybe it was something you were brought up with, or maybe it's, again, a cultural thing that has to do with, you know, where you're from or whatever, that just doesn't really align with you. And maybe had you feeling kind of like a black sheep or a little bit weird or something like that. Really looking at that as honestly as you can, being really honest with yourself, is going to help a huge amount to enable you to really expand. And again, just be yourself and enjoy life and be really optimistic about, again, your opportunities and things like that. And there may be a bit of a tinge of trying to kind of escape from resistances. But if you can just be really honest with yourself to find your own sense of truth, your own sense of like depth of a feeling of alignment with why you're here in the world, and what it is that you feel like your purpose is, what it is that you feel like you're attuned to, that you should be doing. I think that that's just going to be, again, really valuable to you going forward. Also accepting on another level. So we're looking at your own worldview, your own belief system and things like this a lot, and allowing yourself to be freed, to be liberated into your own alignment, right? Along those lines. But also when it comes to what other people believe and their views on the world, their opinions, the world itself, we can't control that. And I think that that's also going to be a really important thing here. Sometimes I feel like we can align ourselves with a certain belief system because we want for that belief system to work out, and we want it to be true, and we want it to be realized in the world. And yet when we attach ourselves in that way, we are kind of then attaching ourselves to a lot of other people And then we can start to identify really strongly with the belief system and feel like the onus is upon us to push that in a better direction, a more successful direction. But that's not really for us to do. I hope that that's making sense. I'll give you a specific example. Maybe you are really into human rights and you are also a bit pacifistic or really, really spiritually aligned, and you feel like human rights efforts would be better served by embracing the like spiritual underpinnings of what we should be attaching to the value of human beings and their comfort and things like that on a spiritual basis. But that doesn't happen. And maybe you feel like a lot of the weaknesses of those movements is like not embracing those things or something like that. This is just one example. But we can't control what other people believe. And sometimes we just need to kind of stay in our own lane in that sense and just do our own thing and have our beliefs and represent ourselves and our convictions on our own. And that doesn't mean that we can't associate with other people who believe similarly, but we just kind of can't control the beliefs of others. We can't control the laws of the world. And so accepting that is going to allow you to basically move forward and be really authentic in your convictions and your beliefs in a lighter and more really personally resonant and authentic kind of way, and with a really authentic kind of personal philosophy that should feel a lot more emotionally satisfying. So yeah, just kind of staying in your own lane by immersing yourself in your own personal expansion, your own studies, your own optimism, your own faith, your own belief system. And again, I kind of have this vision of like releasing yourself or liberating yourself into that, into not needing to take on so much the burden of what other people believe or things like this, but just taking up the mantle of your own mind and your own spirit and your own belief system there, and what you are really wanting to expand into and what you are really wanting to be optimistic about as well. So this can be really productive in exploring belief systems as well, seeing what else kind of truly calls to you, connecting spiritually. This can also, if this is about travel as well and your experience of the world and wanting to expand your personal experience in this life, you could be making plans around taking a trip or exploring a bit more, or trying to get yourself kind of outside of a comfort zone. And I do mean that in kind of a physical sense, but also in a mental or a spiritual sense as well. Like maybe this is taking your spiritual practice to another level, or your spiritual study. Or this could be taking your study of a philosophical topic to another level and exploring the breadth, basically, of philosophical understanding. You may also be considering either going back somewhere to experience it again, or going back to a course of study or something like that. You may be thinking back over what it is that you learned or what it is that was valuable to you about your education and things like that. And ultimately, just really fundamentally realignment, I think, is going to be the name of the game here. Realignment for your own personal expansion and optimism there. But yeah, I think this is a really wonderful new moon for you. It might not be quite as like emotionally laden, but I think it is really philosophical and spiritual in terms of like finding a new quest, basically, that you can get really excited about here. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Pisces. So I hope that this treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me.